I'm Chance Storland, and this is the Spurs Insider, our weekly NBA podcast from ExpressNews.com. And I'm joined now once again by San Antonio Express News sports writer Tom Orsborn. And Tom, what a delight. We get to talk. I don't know if we've been in this situation exactly before. It's not like the Spurs haven't won a few games in a row before, but 6 straight wins following that abysmal rodeo road trip. What is going on? Tell me, Tom.
Yeah, it's been a season. I don't think it's an overstatement to say it's been a season-saving stretch for them. Coming out of that rodeo road trip, Chance, they were floundering. They had lost, one of 8 on the road trip, and they're in danger of losing a playoff position at that point. The playoffs were on the line, and here they are reeling off 6 in a row. And they've beaten some quality opponents. That's the best thing about it. Oklahoma City, Denver, they beat them at home. Milwaukee, of course, last Sunday. Those were all quality wins. Although, as is the case with any NBA game, you have to factor in scheduling. Milwaukee, of course, had to fly from Milwaukee to San Antonio right after they played the night before. They played Charlotte the night before. Then they had to deal with the time change. The Spurs faced Oklahoma City without Paul George, one of the NBA's top offensive players. So, yeah, you factor all those things in, but that's the NBA regular season schedule. Still, they won those games, and yeah, they're in good shape right now. In 6th place in the West, and got some momentum. It's very much right now looking like a usual Greg Popovich team that peaks at the right time of the year as the playoffs approach, and that certainly seems to be what's happening.
We'll talk more specifically about the most recent Dallas game here in a moment, but to go back over some of those victories, as you mentioned, there are different things at play at times. But aside from the one game against Denver where they won only by a point, none of them were that close other than that. And when they played Milwaukee, they faced off against one of their former teammates.
Yeah. Pau Gasol came down and as Mike Finger, our very, very fine, great columnist, pointed out, Pau really helped the Spurs that night. He did not have a good game. When he entered the game, the Bucks had a comfortable lead. By the time he was out of the game, the Spurs, I believe, were either within striking distance or had the lead. So his stint on the court wasn't a memorable one in his return to San Antonio. But with that said, everyone enjoyed seeing Pau. He left here on great terms with the coaching staff and his teammates, all of whom, call him a great professional, a guy who really tried to always do things the right way and really tried to make the team better, even when he wasn't playing. He was one to use his 17 years in the league and his age, 38 years. Old to mentor the younger players, and Derek White, who we're going to be talking about here in a little bit, Chance. He sat next to Pau. Their lockers were next to each other at the practice facility, and Derek spoke very highly of the mentoring and just the sharing of time and generosity that Pau had toward him and all the other Spurs. So it was good to see him.
So let's break down a little bit of what happened against Dallas. This was a good win, wasn't super close or anything, but also this was a fun game because it might have been, still superstar, still star, their big German player. This might be the last time.
Yeah, Dirk Nowitzki. Of course, that was one of the storylines of this game. Dirk is beloved around the league, and will always be remembered as one of the greatest foreign-born player. He had 8 points and hit a couple of threes, which reminded everyone of what he was so good at. So, that was one of the storylines of this game. And Dirk. They're going to get a chance to see him again, possibly on April 10th in the season finale in San Antonio. But you never know. Injuries factor in, and this was just a special game in terms of them being able to see him again and play against a guy who's given the Spurs fits over the years. Those teams have had some memorable matchups, some great playoff matchups. So it was good to see him, and Dirk will go down as one of the greatest. Like I said, he's the best international player the game has ever seen. Of course, the Mavericks have an up-and-coming international player in Luka Doncic, who had a very poor game chance against the Spurs. 12 points. It was one of his worst. He's a rookie, so it was one of his worst games in the NBA. Missed 13 of 18 shots. Just very uncharacteristic of him, but he was playing with a knee injury. And there again, like I was telling you, the NBA, there's so many factors that go into win and losing during the regular season. Probably would have been a much better game had he been healthy. But again, the Spurs took care of business, which is what they've been doing during this winning streak.
So now looking forward to some upcoming games. They have a back-to-back against the Knicks and the Blazers on this upcoming Friday and Saturday. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, that Knicks game has been circled for a while, and not in terms of star power or, great rivalry or anything like that. But the Spurs, one of their worst losses of the season came on February 24th, next to last game of the rodeo road trip. They lost in New York to the Knicks, one of the worst teams in the league. The Knicks had a long home losing streak at Madison Square Garden going into that game, and the Spurs lost. So but, it's funny. They're playing great against the better teams in the league. They've beaten, I think, every top team in the East and the West, but they floundered against some of the worst teams in the league. So that was an embarrassing loss. So they need to make up for it with a win. And then you're in a back-to-back situation. It's the second to the last back-to-back of the season. The next game they play the Trailblazers. A team that they potentially could see in the playoffs. So they need to win that one and establish the upper hand against the Trailblazers. But it'll be a tough situation on a back-to-back. The big thing there, Chance, is to look at, will Pop rest anyone against the Knicks? It'd be an ideal situation under normal circumstances to maybe say give LaMarcus Aldridge or DeMar DeRozan a night off and let them rest here for the stretch run. And then again, they lost to the Knicks. So I don't know. It's going to be a tough call, but I would think he may, Pop usually gives these guys a break when he can in back-to-back situations. So I would think one of those guys might get the night off. They've both been playing very well lately. DeRozan has turned the corner from his slump that he experienced in January. I did a story on him recently talking about how much his left knee was bothering him, and his reluctantly taking 5 games off over the course of the end of January and early February really helped him get back on track. So, but, both those guys could use a break, and it'll be interesting to see if Pop pulls the trigger and gives them the night off against the Knicks.
Moving along here, Derek White is a name that's come up quite often here on the podcast. Really become this elite defender, and I want to hear what
Holy cow.
Just take it away. What are your thoughts? What this means maybe for the rest of the season, and also you think next season when DeJounte Murray, a name that we haven't mentioned a lot on the podcast this season for obvious reasons, when he returns.
Yeah. I had the privilege of watching one of the best performances by a Spur this season in Atlanta on March 6th. It was an incredible performance by Derek White. He's guarding one of the best young players in the game in Hawks rookie Trae Young, who was on an incredible offensive streak going into that game. Derek shut him down, basically. I believe that Trae finished 8 of 22 from the field. He scored 22 points, but was very inefficient shooting-wise. In fact, going into halftime in that game, he had missed, Trae Young had missed 9 of 10 shots. He was totally bothered by Derek White's defense. That was the biggest factor in Young struggling to score in that game. Derek was just outstanding. And then on the offensive end, my gosh, finished with 20-something points, I think nine assists, and an astounding 6 blocks for a guard. And that tied the Spurs franchise record for most blocks by a guard, something Danny Green, the great Danny Green, had set earlier, and Derek tied at chance. It was just a great all-around performance. And in the fourth quarter, in a close game, he just took over. Early in the season, DeMar DeRozan was the Spurs closer. I think it's safe to say that Derek White now has that title. He was so great against the Hawks, scored 9 points in that fourth quarter, had 3 straight buckets during one stretch that really gave the Spurs control of the game. And then toward the end, it's still a 2-possession game. Spurs have a 6-point lead, 36 seconds left. Derek White's out on the perimeter. He zeroes in on LaMarcus Aldridge under the basket in a mismatch situation. He's got a much smaller player defending him. Derek fires a laser pass to him down low for an easy layup. And that just kind of underscores his development as a point guard, which, of course, brings us to next season. DeJounte Murray was the point guard going into this season. He was injured in the preseason, suffered a season-ending knee injury. Derek took over, and slowly but surely he's developed into a pretty good point guard. He's facilitating very well. He has a great balance of knowing when to attack the basket and when to get the ball to his teammates. So it'll be interesting what the coaching staff does next season. My guess is that they probably end up with DeJounte maybe back at point and Derek at off guard, or maybe vice versa. But that backcourt, from a defensive standpoint, will just be outstanding. And I've talked to a couple of coaches, opposing coaches, and a couple of the Spurs about that. Looking to next season, what kind of a defensive force it'll be with Derek White and DeJounte Murray in the backcourt. DeJounte was all NBA second team defense last season. And with those two guys, with their length and their athleticism, I mean, it's just a formidable duo that's really going to give the Spurs a very, very tough perimeter defense, something that they've lacked most of this season.
And then finally here, Tom, got a little bit time left on today's episode. Dare I say, could we talk about some predictions? We've been kind of pulled back and forth by this Spurs team this last season, going up and down. You're kind of wondering if these 6 games really can mean anything because of that, but it's looking good. You've pointed out some reasons why maybe the victories need to be looked at with nuances in mind, but still 6 victories in a row, looking good. Obviously, you just made some points about next season. Any thoughts about the remainder of the season so far?
Well, you look at what they have coming up. Chance, the New York Portland game, the Knicks and the Blazers on back-to-back nights. I like their chances in that. Portland, they're going to beat the Knicks. That's a revenge game for them, so I like them there. It's going to be tough against the Blazers. Blazers are still battling for playoff position as well, seeding. So, right now the Blazers are 5th place. They're tied with the Oklahoma City Thunder for 5th. Or actually 4th. So I could see them, moving up. That game's going to be important to them. Then the Spurs get the Golden State Warriors at home. The Warriors have the have the Nuggets and the red hot Houston Rockets nipping on their heels. So that's going to be an important game for both teams. They get Miami to close the 4-game homestand. Eric Spoelstra always has the Heat ready, and they usually have pretty tough games with the Spurs. And then here comes a big test for the Spurs after that 4-game homestand. They're at Houston, they're at Boston, they're at Charlotte. That's going to tell the tale, I think, of the Spurs. If they go back to what we've known of them this season, struggling on the road, and these are 3 teams that certainly need wins in those situations. That's going to tell us a lot. If the Spurs can keep the momentum going during that road trip, you kind of want to, or you kind of have to start thinking, hey, maybe this team really can do some damage in the playoffs, because what the Spurs team has lacked all season has been any kind of moxie on the road. That's where they've really struggled. So if they can use these they have 6 remaining road games left. After that 3-game stretch, they have the remaining 3 road games are at Denver, at Washington, and at Cleveland. So if they can gain some momentum and show that they can win on the road during this stretch run, then you begin to think, hey, maybe this team can be a real dark horse in the playoffs. So that's going to be the test. How do they do in these remaining 6 road games, Champ? And it'll be really interesting to see.
And thank you to San Antonio Express News sports writer Tom Orsborn for joining me for today's episode of the Spurs Insider, our weekly NBA podcast from ExpressNews.com. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorland.